The thundering hooves and cracking whip cut through the Montana air, as Felicity Hawthorne clung desperately to the side of the careening wagon. Her knuckles had turned white, her muscles burned with the effort, and the terrifying knowledge that she couldn't hold on much longer sent her heart racing wildly in her chest. The year was 1885, and what should have been a routine journey to Helena had turned into a fight for her life. "Help!" she screamed, though her voice was lost to the wind and the rumble of the wagon wheels against the rugged trail. The horses, spooked by a rattlesnake, had taken off at a full gallop, and the elderly driver had been thrown from his seat almost immediately, leaving Felicity alone on the runaway vehicle as it careened down the mountainside. A sharp turn sent her body flying outward, her grip finally failing. Felicity felt herself airborne, the world spinning around her in a blur of blue sky and green pines. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact that would surely break her bones or worse, but instead of the hard ground, she collided with something solid yet yielding. Strong arms wrapped around her, absorbing the force of her fall as she and her rescuer tumbled to the ground. They rolled several times before coming to a stop, his body protectively curled around hers. "I've got you, madam," a deep voice assured her, slightly breathless from the exertion. Felicity opened her eyes to find herself staring into the most striking pair of blue eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a battered leather hat. Dust swirled around them, settling on his broad shoulders and the bandana tied loosely around his neck. "The wagon," she gasped, struggling to sit up. "Let it go," he said, his arms still secure around her. "Nothing in there worth your life." As if to punctuate his point, a tremendous crash echoed through the valley as the wagon presumably met its end somewhere down the slope. "Are you hurt?" he asked, finally releasing her and helping her to sit up. Felicity took stock of herself, brushing dirt from her traveling dress. "I don't believe so," she said, though her voice trembled. "Thanks to you, Mr. Tucker," he said, removing his hat and revealing thick dark hair. "Tucker Reed." "Felicity Hawthorne," she replied, extending a shaking hand which he gently took. "I believe you just saved my life, Mr. Reed." Tucker smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Just doing what any man would do, Miss Hawthorne." But they both knew that wasn't true. It had taken extraordinary reflexes and courage to catch a woman being thrown from a runaway wagon. As Felicity gazed at her rescuer, she had no way of knowing that this chance encounter on a dusty Montana trail would change the course of her life forever. Tucker helped Felicity to her feet, keeping a steadying hand at her elbow as she found her balance. She was taller than most women he'd met, the top of her head reaching his chin. Her chestnut hair had come partially loose from its pins during the ordeal, and several tendrils framed a face that, despite being smudged with dirt, was strikingly beautiful. "We should check on your driver," Tucker said, scanning the trail behind them. "Mr. Guthrie," Felicity nodded, worry creasing her brow. "He was thrown almost as soon as the horses spooked." Together they walked back up the trail, Felicity wincing slightly with each step. Her ankle was tender, though not seriously injured. They found Mr. Guthrie sitting by the side of the path, looking dazed but conscious. "Miss Hawthorne," the elderly man exclaimed upon seeing her. "Thank the Lord you're all right. I couldn't hold them horses when that snake struck." "It's not your fault, Mr. Guthrie," Felicity assured him, kneeling beside him despite her own discomfort. "Are you badly hurt?" the old man grimaced, gesturing to his leg which lay at an awkward angle. "Reckon my riding days might be behind me now." Tucker crouched down to examine the injury. "It's broken, but it's a clean break from what I can tell. We need to get you to a doctor." "My ranch is about 3 miles from here," Tucker continued, straightening up. "I've got a wagon and horses. We can get you both there, and then I'll ride for the doctor in Willow Creek." "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose," Felicity began. "Miss Hawthorne," Tucker interrupted gently, "you're 20 miles from Helena with no transportation, an injured driver, and if I'm not mistaken, a twisted ankle of your own. It's not an imposition, it's the only sensible option." Felicity bit her lip, knowing he was right. "Thank you, Mr. Reed." "Tucker," he corrected with a small smile. "Anyone I've pulled from certain death gets to call me Tucker." Despite the gravity of their situation, Felicity found herself returning his smile. "Then you must call me Felicity." Tucker fashioned a splint for Mr. Guthrie's leg using branches and strips torn from his own bandana, then helped the man to a comfortable position against a tree trunk. "I'll be back with my wagon as quick as I can. An hour, maybe less." Before leaving, he removed a canteen from his saddle and handed it to Felicity. "There's plenty of water. Stay in the shade and rest that ankle." Felicity nodded, suddenly aware of how parched her throat was after the ordeal. "We'll be fine. Please be careful." Tucker's eyes lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Always am," he replied, then mounted his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, and rode off down the trail. As he disappeared around a bend, Felicity released a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She settled beside Mr. Guthrie, offering him water. "That's a good man there," the old driver commented, taking a careful sip. "Saw the whole thing from where I landed. Never seen anyone move so fast, catching you like that." "Yes," Felicity agreed softly, her eyes still on the empty trail. "He certainly appeared at the right moment." Mr. Guthrie studied her thoughtfully. "What brings you all the way out to Helena anyway, Miss Hawthorne, if you don't mind my asking?" Felicity's expression sobered. "My father passed away 3 months ago. I've come to settle his affairs and decide what to do with his property." "Judge Hawthorne was your father?" Mr. Guthrie's eyebrows rose in surprise. "He was a good man, fair to everyone, rich or poor. This territory's worse off without him." "Thank you," Felicity said quietly. "I hadn't seen him in 5 years. Mother and I remained in Boston after they separated. I regret that now." "He spoke of you often," the old man offered kindly. "Always had a gleam in his eye when he mentioned his daughter back east getting educated." Tears welled unexpectedly in Felicity's eyes. She had come to Montana, prepared to efficiently handle her father's estate and return to her life in Boston, where she taught at a women's college. Now, sitting injured on a dusty trail waiting for a handsome stranger to return, her carefully laid plans seemed to be unraveling. True to his word, Tucker returned in less than an hour, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 reliable-looking draft horses. He had brought blankets and pillows to make his passengers more comfortable. With gentle efficiency, he helped Mr. Guthrie into the wagon bed, making sure the splinted leg was secure and as comfortable as possible. When he turned to assist Felicity, she was already attempting to climb up on her own, grimacing as she put weight on her injured ankle. "Allow me," Tucker said, and before she could protest, he had swept her up into his arms. Felicity gasped, instinctively wrapping her arms around his neck. For the second time that day, she found herself held against his broad chest, breathing in the scent of leather, pine, and something uniquely his own. Her heart fluttered traitorously. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No sense aggravating that ankle," Tucker replied, his voice rumbling through his chest against her side. He set her carefully on the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they traveled, Tucker explained that his ranch, the Double R, had been established by his father shortly after the Civil War. He had taken over operations 5 years ago when his father's health began to fail. "Pa's still with us, but he mostly sits on the porch these days, telling everyone how much better he would have handled everything, Tucker said with affectionate exasperation. You must be close to your father, Felicity observed. Tucker nodded. He's a hard man in many ways, but fair. Taught me everything I know about ranching, horses, and treating people right. He glanced at her. What about your family? Felicity briefly explained her situation, her father's passing, her teaching position, her mother's remarriage to a wealthy Boston merchant. So you'll be heading back east once you've settled your father's affairs? Tucker asked, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. That was my plan, Felicity admitted, though I'm beginning to realize it may take longer than I anticipated. Montana has a way of complicating plans, Tucker said with a wry smile. The trail widened into a well-maintained road, and soon they crested a hill that revealed a picturesque valley below. The Double R Ranch spread out before them, a large main house, several outbuildings, corrals full of horses, and pastures dotted with cattle. It was larger and more prosperous looking than Felicity had expected. It's beautiful, she said honestly. Pride showed clearly on Tucker's face. Been in the family for 20 years now. Not the biggest spread in Montana, but we do all right. As they approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch, gray-haired and straight-backed, her expression concerned as she took in the wagon with its unexpected passengers. That's Mrs. Fitzgerald, our housekeeper, Tucker explained. Been with us since I was a boy. She'll help get you settled while I ride for the doctor. Mrs. Fitzgerald proved to be as efficient as she was kind. Within an hour, Mr. Guthrie was installed in a downstairs bedroom. Felicity was settled in a comfortable guest room with her ankle properly wrapped, and Tucker had ridden off to fetch the doctor from Willow Creek, the nearest town. Left alone, Felicity took stock of her situation. Her trunk with all her belongings had been on the wagon that crashed. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, which were torn and dirty from her ordeal. Her purse with her money and documents had miraculously stayed with her, secured to her wrist with a strap, but everything else was gone. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Fitzgerald entered carrying a neatly folded stack of clothing. These belonged to Mr. Reed's sister, she explained, placing them on the bed. She's married and living in California now, but left some things behind. You look to be about her size. That's very thoughtful, thank you, Felicity said, genuinely touched by the consideration. There's a wash basin and fresh water on the dresser, the housekeeper continued. Dinner will be ready in about an hour if you feel up to joining us. After Mrs. Fitzgerald left, Felicity gratefully washed away the dirt and dust from her adventure. The borrowed dress, a simple blue calico, fit reasonably well, though it was perhaps an inch too short. She rebraided her hair and pinned it up as neatly as possible without her usual toiletries. When she made her way downstairs, leaning on the railing for support, she found Tucker had returned with the doctor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He had already seen to Mr. Guthrie and confirmed Tucker's assessment, a clean break that would heal well but would require several weeks of rest. And now for our other patient, the doctor said, turning to Felicity. I'm Dr. Martin. Let's have a look at that ankle. After a brief examination, he pronounced it a mild sprain. Keep it wrapped. Stay off it as much as possible for a few days and you'll be fine, he assured her. Dinner was a simple but delicious affair of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. Tucker's father, Oliver Reed, joined them, a robust man in his 70s with the same striking blue eyes as his son, though his once dark hair had turned completely white. So you're Judge Hawthorne's daughter, the elder Reed said, studying Felicity with interest. Your father was a good man. Helped me with a water rights dispute some years back. Fair to a fault he was. Thank you, Mr. Reed, Felicity replied. I'm learning he was well respected here. Call me Oliver, please, he insisted. Anyone my son rescues from certain death is practically family. Felicity blushed at the reference to her dramatic rescue. Your son was very brave. I can't thank him enough. Just happened to be in the right place, Tucker said modestly, though his eyes warmed when they met hers across the table. Nonsense, his father declared. Not every man would or could have done what you did. Miss Hawthorne, my son is too humble for his own good. Been that way since he was a boy. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, with Oliver regaling them with stories of the early days of the ranch and the challenges they had faced. Tucker occasionally corrected his father's more dramatic embellishments, leading to good-natured bickering that made Felicity smile. After dinner, Tucker suggested they sit on the porch to enjoy the evening air. He helped Felicity to a comfortable chair and brought her a footstool for her injured ankle. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It's so different from Boston, Felicity remarked, gazing at the spectacular vista. Everything here seems bigger somehow. Tucker nodded, settling into a chair beside her. That's Montana for you. Big sky, big mountains, big country. Makes a person feel small sometimes, but not in a bad way. I understand what you mean, Felicity said thoughtfully. In Boston, everything is about what people have built, the buildings, the society, the institutions. Here, it's about what was already here long before us. Exactly, Tucker agreed, looking pleased that she understood, though we're doing our share of building too. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit on the porch, casting a warm glow. Tucker brought out a pot of coffee and 2 cups, pouring one for Felicity. I sent a telegram to Helena while I was in town, he told her. Let the bank know what happened and that you'd be delayed. Figured that was your first destination. Felicity was touched by his thoughtfulness. It was, thank you. I was supposed to meet with my father's attorney tomorrow. I'll need to reschedule once I can get to town. I can take you to Helena in a few days once your ankle's stronger, Tucker offered. We need supplies anyway, and I'd feel better seeing you safely there. You've already done so much, Felicity protested. I couldn't impose further. Tucker's expression grew serious. It's no imposition. Truth is, I'd worry about you otherwise. The sincerity in his voice sent a pleasant warmth through Felicity's chest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching as stars appeared in the vast Montana sky. Your father mentioned you teach at a college, Tucker said eventually. What do you teach? Literature and composition, Felicity replied. I particularly love the romantic poets Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats. Tucker's expression brightened. We have quite a library inside. My mother was a great reader. She insisted on having books shipped from back east. Said just because we lived in the wilderness didn't mean we had to think like wilderness people. I'd love to see it, Felicity said eagerly. Tomorrow, Tucker promised. It's getting late and you should rest that ankle. As if on cue, Mrs. Fitzgerald appeared at the door. Miss Hawthorne, I've turned down your bed and left a pitcher of fresh water in your room. Tucker stood and offered Felicity his arm. Allow me to escort you upstairs. Leaning on his strong arm, Felicity made her way up the stairs, acutely aware of his nearness and the gentle way he matched his pace to hers. At her door, she turned to thank him. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there today, she said softly. But I was, Tucker replied simply. And I'm glad of it, though I'm sorry for the circumstances that brought you here. His eyes held hers for a long moment, and Felicity felt a flutter of something new and unexpected in her chest. Then he tipped his hat slightly and stepped back. Good night, Felicity. Sleep well. Good night, Tucker. Inside her room, Felicity sat on the edge of the bed, her heart beating a little faster than normal. It had been a day of extremes, terror and relief, pain and comfort, strangers becoming something more than acquaintances in the span of hours. As she drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was of blue eyes and strong arms that had plucked her from disaster. The following days fell into a pleasant rhythm. True to his word, Tucker showed Felicity the library, a cozy room lined with bookshelves containing everything from classical literature to practical manuals on animal husbandry. She was delighted to discover several volumes of poetry, including her beloved romantics. "Your mother had excellent taste," she told Tucker as she reverently handled a leather-bound collection of Wordsworth. "She would have liked you," Tucker said with a soft smile. She always said education was wasted if it didn't lead to appreciation of beauty. Felicity's ankle improved steadily, and by the third day, she was able to walk without much discomfort, though Tucker insisted she continue to rest it as much as possible. Mr. Guthrie was also recovering well, though his broken leg would keep him immobile for weeks. Felicity found herself drawn into the daily life of the ranch. She helped Mrs. Fitzgerald with meal preparation, mended some of Tucker's shirts that had been piling up for repairs, and spent hours in conversation with Oliver Reed, who seemed to enjoy having a new audience for his stories. Tucker came and went, attending to ranch business, but always made time to check on Felicity throughout the day. In the evenings, they often sat together on the porch, talking long after the others had retired. She learned that Tucker had attended 2 years of university in Denver before his mother's illness called him home to the ranch. He had a quick mind and a curiosity about the world that surprised her. "Most people assume because I'm a rancher I don't care for intellectual pursuits," he told her one evening. "But out here, a man needs his mind as much as his hands. There's plenty of thinking time when you're riding fence lines alone." "What do you think about?" Felicity asked. Tucker gazed at the stars for a moment before answering. "The future, mostly. How to improve the ranch, breed better stock, sometimes about the larger world and my small place in it." He turned to her with a wry smile. "And sometimes just about whether that mountain lion I heard last night is going to go after my calves." Felicity laughed, charmed by his honesty. "A balance of the philosophical and the practical." "Exactly," he agreed. "What about you? What does a Boston literature professor think about when she's not teaching?" Felicity considered the question. "I suppose I think about stories, the ones in books, and the ones people are living all around me. Everyone has a story, you know." "And what's your story, Felicity Hawthorne?" Tucker asked, his voice softening. She looked down at her hands. "It's not very exciting, I'm afraid. Privileged childhood, good education, teaching position. The most dramatic thing that ever happened to me was being thrown from a runaway wagon." "Somehow I doubt that's the whole story," Tucker said gently. "There's a sadness in your eyes sometimes. Not always, but it's there." Felicity was startled by his perception. Few people had ever noticed the melancholy she worked so hard to conceal. "My parents' separation was difficult," she admitted. "My mother blamed Montana for taking my father away from us. She refused to visit, and eventually he stopped coming east. I sided with her for too long, writing less and less frequently to my father. By the time I realized my mistake, it seemed too late to repair the damage." "And now you're here to say goodbye," Tucker said, understanding in his voice. Felicity nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. "Yes, and to figure out what to do with his property. Sell it, I suppose, though that feels like erasing the last piece of him." Tucker reached over and briefly covered her hand with his. "For what it's worth, I think he would understand, and I think he'd be proud of the woman you've become." His touch was warm and reassuring, and Felicity found herself turning her hand to briefly squeeze his before they both pulled away, suddenly conscious of the intimacy of the gesture. "Thank you," she said softly, "for listening and for understanding." The next morning, Tucker announced he would take Felicity to Helena the following day. "Your ankle seems much better, and you've been patient long enough," he said over breakfast. "I imagine you're anxious to get on with your business." Though she knew it was the sensible course, Felicity felt an unexpected reluctance at the thought of leaving the Double R. "What about Mr. Guthrie?" she asked. "He's welcome to stay as long as needed," Oliver interjected. "No sense moving him until that leg's healed some more." "Then yes, tomorrow would be fine," Felicity agreed, trying to sound more enthusiastic than she felt. "I appreciate it." After breakfast, Tucker needed to check on a pregnant mare in the far pasture. On impulse, he asked, "Would you like to come along? It's a nice ride and I could show you more of the ranch." Felicity hesitated. "I haven't ridden in years, not since I was a girl visiting my grandparents in Vermont." "I've got just the horse for you," Tucker assured her. "Daisy's gentle as they come. And it would be good for your ankle to get some different movement." The idea of spending more time with Tucker was appealing, so Felicity agreed. She changed into her now clean traveling dress, which was more practical for riding than the borrowed calico, and met Tucker at the stables. True to his word, Daisy proved to be a calm, cooperative mount. Tucker helped Felicity onto the mare's back, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The brief contact sent a now familiar flutter through her chest. They rode at a leisurely pace, Tucker pointing out features of the land and sharing stories of growing up on the ranch. They crossed streams, skirted stands of pine, and climbed a gentle rise that offered a panoramic view of the valley. "It's breathtaking," Felicity said, reining Daisy to a stop beside Tucker's mount. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Tucker admitted. "I come here to think, or sometimes just to remind myself how lucky I am to call this place home." They dismounted to rest the horses, settling on a sun-warmed boulder. Tucker produced apples from his saddlebag, offering one to Felicity. "I've been thinking," he said after they had eaten in companionable silence for a while, "about your father's property." Felicity looked at him curiously. "What about it? You mentioned it was a small ranch just outside Helena. If you're planning to sell, you might want to have someone look it over first, make sure you're getting a fair price. I'd be happy to ride out there with you, give you my opinion if you'd like." "That's very kind," Felicity said, touched by the offer. "I know nothing about ranch property values. I would appreciate your expertise." Tucker nodded, seemingly pleased. "It's settled then. We'll head to Helena tomorrow, you can meet with the attorney, and then we can visit your father's place." As they prepared to remount, Tucker suddenly stilled, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Don't move," he said quietly, his tone instantly alert. Felicity froze, following his gaze to a patch of brush about 50 yards away. At first she saw nothing, then a tawny form materialized, a mountain lion, sleek and powerful, watching them with unblinking eyes. Tucker slowly reached for the rifle in his saddle holster, his movements deliberate and careful. "Stay calm," he murmured. "They usually avoid people, he's just curious." Heart pounding, Felicity remained motionless as Tucker raised the rifle. But instead of aiming directly at the cat, he pointed slightly above it and fired a warning shot into the air. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley, and the mountain lion disappeared into the brush with astonishing speed. "There," Tucker said, lowering the rifle. "No harm done. He was just passing through." Felicity released a shaky breath. "Are they common here?" "Common enough," Tucker replied, helping her back onto Daisy. "But attacks on humans are rare. Still, best to be respectful of their territory." The encounter left Felicity with a heightened awareness of the wildness of this place. Montana was beautiful but untamed, dangerous in ways Boston could never be. Yet she found herself exhilarated rather than frightened by the knowledge. They checked on the pregnant mare, which Tucker predicted would foal within the week, then rode back to the ranch house. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the land, gilding everything in warm light. "Thank you for today," Felicity said as they unsaddled the horses. "I've enjoyed seeing more of your ranch." "I've enjoyed showing it to you," Tucker replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. There was something in his expression that made Felicity's heart beat a little faster, a warmth and admiration that went beyond mere friendliness. That evening, Mrs. Fitzgerald outdid herself with a special dinner to mark Felicity's last night at the Double R. There was roast chicken, fresh vegetables from the kitchen garden, and an apple pie that Tucker declared was the best in 3 territories. After dinner, Felicity excused herself to pack her few belongings and write a letter to her mother, explaining her delay and current circumstances. When she came back downstairs, she found Tucker alone on the porch, the others having retired for the night. "I thought perhaps you'd gone to bed," he said, rising as she approached. "Not yet," she replied, settling into what had become her chair over the past few days. "It's too beautiful an evening to waste on sleep." The night was indeed lovely, with a nearly full moon casting silver light over the ranch and a chorus of crickets providing gentle background music. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine and sage. "Will you miss Montana when you return to Boston?" Tucker asked after a comfortable silence. Felicity considered the question seriously. "Yes," she finally said. "More than I expected to. There's something about this place. It gets under your skin." "That it does," Tucker agreed. "I tried living away once those 2 years at university. Found myself homesick for things I'd never even noticed before. The particular blue of the sky just before dusk, the smell of sage after rain, the way sound carries across the valley on a still morning." "You're a poet at heart, Tucker Reed," Felicity said with a smile. He laughed softly. "Don't let that get around. Bad for my reputation as a hardened rancher." Their eyes met and held in the moonlight. Something unspoken passed between them, an awareness, a possibility that had been growing since that first dramatic meeting on the trail. Tucker broke the moment first, clearing his throat slightly. "We should get an early start tomorrow. It's a good 6-hour ride to Helena, longer with the wagon." "Of course," Felicity agreed, rising from her chair. "Good night, then." Tucker stood as well, stepping closer. "Felicity," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Whatever happens tomorrow or after, I want you to know I'm glad that wagon threw you into my path." Before she could respond, he leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Sleep well," he murmured, then turned and walked into the house, leaving Felicity standing on the porch with her hand pressed to her cheek and her heart racing in her chest. Morning arrived with a thin mist clinging to the valley floor and the promise of another beautiful day. Felicity dressed in her traveling outfit, now cleaned and mended thanks to Mrs. Fitzgerald, and packed the few borrowed items she had been using. At breakfast, the mood was subdued. Mr. Guthrie thanked Felicity for checking on him daily and wished her well with her father's affairs. Oliver shook her hand firmly and told her she was welcome back any time. Mrs. Fitzgerald pressed a package of food for the journey into her hands and gave her a motherly hug. "You've brought some sunshine to this house," the housekeeper whispered. "It's been too long since we had a woman's touch around here." Tucker had readied the wagon, the same one he had used to bring Felicity and Mr. Guthrie to the ranch days earlier. He helped her up onto the seat, his hands lingering briefly at her waist, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they pulled away from the ranch house, Felicity looked back at the place that had been her temporary haven. Oliver stood on the porch waving, and she raised her hand in return, surprised by the lump in her throat. "They've grown fond of you," Tucker commented, noticing her emotional response. "Pa especially. He hasn't had anyone new to tell his stories to in years." "I've grown fond of them too," Felicity admitted. "Of all of this." She gestured to the beautiful landscape around them. The journey to Helena passed more quickly than Felicity expected, filled with conversation and comfortable silences. Tucker pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's history, from Native American legends to tales of early settlers and gold rushes. By mid-afternoon, they were approaching the outskirts of Helena. The territorial capital was bustling with activity: miners, businessmen, settlers, and workers crowding the streets. After the peace of the Double R, the noise and bustle were almost overwhelming. Tucker guided the wagon to a modest hotel on the main street. "The Montana House," he said. "Respectable place, owned by friends of my father's. You'll be comfortable here while you're in town." He helped her down from the wagon and carried her small bag inside. The hotel proprietor, a plump woman named Mrs. Harmon, greeted them warmly. "Tucker Reed, as I live and breathe. Haven't seen you in town for months." "Been busy at the ranch, Mrs. Harmon. This is Miss Felicity Hawthorne, Judge Hawthorne's daughter. She needs a room for a few days while she settles her father's affairs." Mrs. Harmon's expression softened at the mention of the judge. "My condolences on your loss, Miss Hawthorne. Your father was a good man, fair to everyone. We still miss him around here." "Thank you," Felicity replied, touched once again by the high regard in which her father had been held. Once Felicity was settled in her room, Tucker said, "I need to see to some supplies while we're in town. The attorney's office is just 2 blocks down. Would you like me to accompany you there?" "Thank you, but I should be fine," Felicity assured him. "We can meet back here for dinner. Perhaps you could tell me more about what to look for when we visit my father's property tomorrow." "I'd like that," Tucker agreed. 6 o'clock in the dining room. After Tucker left, Felicity freshened up as best she could and walked to the attorney's office. Mr. Abernathy, a thin, serious man with spectacles and a meticulously trimmed beard, received her with formal courtesy. "Miss Hawthorne, we were concerned when you didn't arrive as scheduled. I received the telegram about your misadventure, a most unfortunate start to your visit." "It could have been worse," Felicity said, thinking of Tucker's timely rescue. "I was fortunate to find help." Mr. Abernathy nodded absently, already turning to a stack of documents on his desk. "Now, as to your father's estate. The will is straightforward. Everything he owned passes to you as his sole heir. This includes the ranch property about 5 miles outside of town, a modest bank account, and some personal effects which are stored here in my office." He pushed a document toward her. "This is an inventory of the estate. As you can see, the ranch is small but unencumbered by debt. There have been several inquiries about purchasing it since the judge's passing. Land in this area is quite desirable." Felicity scanned the document, noting the description of the ranch: 160 acres with a small house, barn, and corral. No livestock was listed. "Did my father actually ranch the property?" she asked. "Not actively," Mr. Abernathy replied. "He kept a few horses and hired a local man to tend them and maintain the place. He used it primarily as a retreat from his duties in town. The judge was not a rancher by trade, as you know." Felicity nodded, remembering her father's letters describing his little piece of Montana wilderness. He had purchased it shortly after taking the judgeship, falling in love with the landscape and the promise of peace it offered. "I'd like to visit the property before making any decisions," she told the attorney. "Of course," I can arrange for a driver to take you out tomorrow if you wish." "That won't be necessary," Felicity said. "I have a friend who has offered to accompany me." Mr. Abernathy raised an eyebrow but made no comment. "Very well. The keys are here. The caretaker, Mr. Peterson, comes by every few days to check on things, but otherwise the place is vacant." After concluding their business and accepting a small box of her father's personal effects, Felicity returned to the hotel. She had an hour before meeting Tucker, so she took the opportunity to open the box in the privacy of her room. Inside were items that made her father's absence suddenly painfully real: his pocket watch, a fountain pen she had given him for his birthday years ago, a daguerreotype of Felicity as a child with both her parents, looking happy and united. At the bottom of the box was a small leather journal. With trembling fingers, Felicity opened it to find her father's familiar handwriting. It was a personal diary, spanning the last year of his life. She began to read, tears welling in her eyes as she discovered entries about his work, his thoughts on justice and law, and frequent mentions of his daughter in Boston. "Received a letter from Felicity today," one entry read. "She writes of her students and her work, but I read between the lines. There is a loneliness there that mirrors my own. I wish I could bridge the distance between us, not just in miles but in the years of silence. Perhaps when she comes to settle my affairs, for I feel my time growing short, she will find something of me here that speaks to her heart." Felicity closed the journal, overcome with emotion. Her father had known her better than she realized, even from a distance, and he had anticipated this moment, her reading his words after his passing. She was still sitting with the journal when a knock came at her door. Checking the small clock on the bedside table, she realized it was already past 6. She had lost track of time. "Just a moment," she called, hastily wiping her eyes and tucking the journal away. She opened the door to find Tucker standing there, concern evident in his expression. "I was worried when you didn't come down," he said, then noticed her reddened eyes. "Felicity, what's wrong?" "I'm sorry," she said, gesturing to the box on the bed. "I was going through some of my father's things and lost track of time." Tucker's expression softened with understanding. "No need to apologize. Would you prefer to be alone? We can have dinner another time." "No," Felicity said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "No, I'd like the company. Just give me a minute to freshen up." Over dinner in the hotel's modest but comfortable dining room, Felicity shared what she had learned about her father's property and her plan to visit it the next day. "I'd still like your opinion," she told Tucker. "Even though it's not a working ranch, I want to make sure I understand its value before making any decisions." "Happy to help," Tucker assured her. "Though I should warn you, I'm not exactly an impartial advisor." Felicity looked at him questioningly. "What do you mean?" Tucker's eyes held hers steadily. "I mean, I find myself hoping you might have reasons to stay in Montana a while longer." The implication behind his words sent warmth spreading through Felicity's chest. "Tucker, you don't need to say anything," he said quickly. "I know you have a life waiting for you in Boston. I just wanted you to know where I stand." They finished their meal talking of lighter matters, but Tucker's words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Tucker arrived at the hotel with the wagon, and they set off for Judge Hawthorne's ranch. The road followed a river for several miles before turning up into a series of rolling hills covered with pine and aspen. "Your father chose a beautiful spot," Tucker commented as they crested a rise and the small ranch came into view. Felicity caught her breath at the sight. The modest house sat on a gentle slope, surrounded by aspen trees whose leaves glittered in the morning sun. Behind it rose the jagged peaks of the mountains, while before it stretched a meadow dotted with wildflowers that led down to a small creek. "It's exactly as he described it in his letters," she whispered. They pulled up to the house, a sturdy log structure with a wide porch across the front. Felicity sat motionless for a moment, overwhelmed by the knowledge that this was her father's beloved retreat, the place where he had spent his final years. Tucker seemed to sense her emotion. "Take your time," he said gently. "I'll check the outbuildings while you look at the house." Nodding gratefully, Felicity climbed down from the wagon and approached the house, key in hand. The door opened with a creak, revealing a simple but comfortable interior. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, flanked by bookshelves filled with volumes she recognized from her childhood home. A desk by the window held more of her father's papers, and comfortable chairs were arranged to take advantage of both the fireplace and the view. Felicity moved through the room slowly, touching her father's possessions, absorbing the sense of him that lingered in the space. In the bedroom, she found framed photographs on the dresser: her graduation from college, her parents' wedding day, Felicity as a baby in her father's arms. He had kept her close, even when miles and silence separated them. Outside, she found Tucker examining the corral fence. "The place is in good condition," he told her. "Your father's caretaker has done a fine job maintaining everything. The barn needs a new roof within a year or two, but otherwise it's sound. Good water source with the creek, and the pasture is excellent." "It's smaller than your ranch," Felicity observed. Tucker nodded. "Much smaller, but it's a nice piece of land. Whoever buys it could run a small herd or raise horses, or just enjoy it as your father did." They walked down to the creek together, Felicity trailing her fingers in the cold, clear water. "He loved it here," she said softly. "I can feel it." "It's the kind of place that captures a person's heart," Tucker agreed, looking not at the landscape but at Felicity. She met his gaze, suddenly very aware of their solitude and the growing connection between them. "Tucker, about what you said last night." Before she could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. They turned to see a rider approaching, a man in his 50s with a weathered face and practical clothes. "That must be Peterson, the caretaker," Felicity said, somewhat relieved at the interruption. What had she been about to say to Tucker? She wasn't even sure herself. Mr. Peterson proved to be a straightforward, no-nonsense sort of man who had clearly respected Judge Hawthorne. He showed them around the property more thoroughly, pointing out its features and the work he had done to maintain it. "Judge was real particular about keeping the place up," he explained. "Said it reminded him of his childhood home back east, though I reckon that place didn't have these mountains as a backdrop." By the time they returned to Helena in the late afternoon, Felicity had a much clearer understanding of her father's property and its value. What she didn't have was clarity about what to do with it, or about her growing feelings for the man beside her. Tucker had business at the bank, so they agreed to meet again for dinner. Alone in her hotel room, Felicity pulled out her father's journal again, seeking guidance from his words. She turned to one of the final entries, dated just weeks before his death. "I rode out to the Aspens today and watched the leaves turn golden in the autumn light. There is a peace here that I have found nowhere else." I find myself thinking of Felicity, wondering if she might someday see this place and understand why it called to me so strongly. We are more alike than she knows, my daughter and I. Both seekers of beauty and truth, both stubborn in our convictions. I hope someday she finds a place that speaks to her soul as this one speaks to mine. Felicity closed the journal, her decision made. At dinner, she told Tucker, "I'm not going to sell the ranch." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "You're keeping it, even though you'll be returning to Boston." "I'm not sure I am returning to Boston," Felicity said, the words feeling right as she spoke them. At least not permanently. I need to go back to settle my affairs there, resign from my teaching position properly. But then, I think I might come back here, to Montana. Tucker's expression transformed with hope. Felicity, are you certain? This is a big decision. Reading my father's journal, seeing his place, I understand now why he couldn't leave. There's something about this territory that calls to me too. She took a deep breath. And there are other reasons I might want to stay. Their eyes met across the table, the implication clear in her words. Tucker reached for her hand, holding it gently in his. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pleased to hear that, he said, his voice deeper than usual. Since the moment I caught you, I've felt something I can't quite explain. A connection I wasn't looking for but now can't imagine being without. Felicity turned her hand in his, interlacing their fingers. I feel it too. It's happened so quickly, but it feels more real than anything I've known before. Life out here can be hard, Tucker warned, though his eyes shone with happiness. Different from what you're used to. I know, Felicity acknowledged. But I think perhaps I've been waiting for something to challenge me, to wake me up from the comfortable routine I've built. When that wagon threw me into your arms, it was terrifying, but it was also the most alive I've felt in years. Tucker smiled, the dimple appearing in his cheek. Well, I can't promise to catch you from runaway wagons every day, but I can promise life with me would never be dull. Life with you, Felicity repeated, her heart racing at the implication. Tucker's expression grew serious. I know it's soon, too soon, perhaps, but I also know my own mind and heart. I care for you, Felicity Hawthorne, more than I thought possible in such a short time. I'm not asking for promises now, but I am asking for a chance. Come back to Montana after you've settled your affairs in Boston. Give us time to see what might grow between us. Felicity squeezed his hand, her own certainty growing with each passing moment. I will, she promised. I'll come back. The following day, Felicity met again with Mr. Abernathy to inform him of her decision to keep her father's property. The attorney seemed surprised but pleased. Your father always hoped you might come to appreciate Montana as he did, he told her. I think he would be gratified by your decision. Felicity spent the next few days in Helena, arranging for Mr. Peterson to continue as caretaker until her return and purchasing necessities for her journey back east. Tucker remained in town, ostensibly to complete his business but primarily to spend time with her. They explored Helena together, Tucker showing her the territorial capital, the grand homes of successful miners, and the humble beginnings of what was growing into a substantial city. In the evenings, they attended a local theatrical performance, dined at the best restaurant in town, and once, daringly, went to a dance hall where Tucker swept her around the floor with unexpected grace. Where did a rancher learn to dance like this? Felicity asked, breathless from a particularly spirited turn. My mother insisted, Tucker replied with a grin. Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a buffalo. She made Pa build a platform in the barn and taught us both. Each day deepened their connection, conversations ranging from literature to ranching, from childhood memories to dreams for the future. By the time Felicity's departure date arrived, what had begun as an unexpected attraction had blossomed into something neither could deny. The stagecoach that would take Felicity to the railroad connection in Bozeman was scheduled to depart at noon. Tucker brought her to the station, her newly purchased trunk loaded with her father's journal and the few personal possessions she had acquired during her stay. It's only for a few months, Felicity said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I'll write as soon as I reach Boston and again when I know my return date. Tucker nodded, his expression solemn. I'll be counting the days. As the driver called for passengers to board, Tucker pulled something from his pocket, a small carved wooden box. "I want you to have this," he said, placing it in her hand. "Open it when you're on your way." Felicity clutched the box tightly. He silenced her with a kiss, their first real kiss, gentle but firm, a promise and a pledge wrapped in the warmth of his lips against hers. When he pulled away, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Come back to me, Felicity Hawthorne." "I will," she whispered. "I promise." On the stagecoach, as Helena receded behind her, Felicity opened the wooden box. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant in the shape of an aspen leaf, attached to a fine chain. Beneath it was a note in Tucker's strong handwriting. "So you'll remember the place that brought us together. Safe journey and swift return. Yours, Tucker." Tears blurred Felicity's vision as she fastened the necklace around her throat, the silver leaf cool against her skin. It was a talisman, a reminder of the unexpected turn her life had taken and the man who waited for her return. The journey to Boston was long and tiring, but Felicity barely noticed the discomfort, her mind filled with plans and possibilities. By the time she reached her mother's elegant Beacon Hill home, she had composed and discarded a dozen versions of how to explain her decision. In the end, her mother surprised her. After the initial shock of hearing Felicity's adventure and subsequent decision, Eleanor Hawthorne Preston sat back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. "You have the same look in your eyes that your father had when he first came back from Montana," she said softly. "That same certainty. I fought it then, tried to make him choose between that place and us. I was wrong to do so." "Mother," Eleanor raised a hand. "Let me finish, Felicity. Your father and I grew apart for many reasons, not just geography. We were young when we married and we changed in different directions. But I never stopped caring for him, and I never should have made you feel you had to choose sides." She reached for Felicity's hand. "If Montana calls to you as it called to him, and if this man makes you happy, then you have my blessing. Life is too short to ignore what makes your heart full." Relieved and grateful, Felicity threw her arms around her mother. "Thank you for understanding." "I don't entirely understand," Eleanor admitted with a small smile, "but I trust you know your own mind. You always have, even as a child." The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Felicity resigned from her teaching position, explaining to the surprised dean that family matters required her relocation. She sold or gave away most of her possessions, keeping only books, personal mementos, and clothing suitable for her new life. Through it all, she exchanged letters with Tucker. His arrived weekly, filled with news of the ranch, stories of his father's latest outrageous claims, updates on Mr. Guthrie's recovery, and always, beneath the everyday details, a current of longing that matched her own. "The aspens are turning golden," he wrote in October. "I rode out to your father's place yesterday and sat on the porch, imagining you there. Peterson has everything in good order for your return. Pa keeps asking when you'll be back, claiming he needs someone who appreciates his stories properly, but I think he misses you almost as much as I do." Felicity wrote back with equal fervor, sharing her progress and her growing excitement about returning to Montana. "Boston feels like a dream now," she confessed in one letter. "Or perhaps Montana was the dream, and I'm merely sleepwalking through my days here until I can return to what has become more real to me than the life I've known for years." Finally, in early November, everything was arranged. Felicity booked her passage west, timing her arrival in Helena for the week before Thanksgiving. She sent a telegram to Tucker with the details, then spent her final days in Boston saying goodbye to friends and the city that had been her home for so long. The westward journey seemed interminable. Felicity passed the time rereading Tucker's letters and her father's journal, each reinforcing her certainty that she was moving toward, not away from, her true home. As the train approached Bozeman, nervous excitement began to build in her chest. What if the connection she felt with Tucker had been circumstantial, born of drama and proximity rather than genuine affinity? What if Montana in winter proved harsher than she was prepared for? What if she was making an enormous mistake? But when the train pulled into the station and she saw Tucker waiting on the platform, all doubts vanished. He stood tall and straight in his best clothes, scanning the windows anxiously until he spotted her. The smile that transformed his face mirrored the joy that burst in her own heart. Felicity barely waited for the train to stop before hurrying to the exit. Tucker met her at the steps, lifting her down and into his arms in one fluid motion. For a long moment, they simply held each other, relearning the feel and scent and solidity of one another. "You're really here," Tucker murmured against her hair. "I was half afraid you'd change your mind." "Never," Felicity assured him, pulling back just enough to see his face. "This is where I belong now." Their kiss was sweet and sure, a homecoming and a beginning wrapped into one perfect moment. The stagecoach ride to Helena was filled with conversation as they bridged the gap of their separation. Tucker had news Mr. Guthrie had recovered enough to travel back to his family in Oregon. Mrs. Fitzgerald had fallen ill but was now on the mend. The ranch had prospered with a good harvest and healthy calves. "And I have news too," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I've been doing some thinking while you were away." "What kind of thinking?" Felicity asked, suddenly anxious herself. Tucker took her hand. "The kind that leads a man to make plans for the future, for our future if you're willing." Felicity's heart began to race. "I'm listening." "I know you've just arrived and we still have much to learn about each other," Tucker said carefully. "But I also know what I feel for you is real and lasting. I don't want to rush you, but I want you to know my intentions." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "This was my grandmother's," he said, tipping a simple gold ring with a small, perfect diamond into his palm. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer, but I am asking you to consider becoming my wife when you feel ready." Tears sprang to Felicity's eyes as she looked from the ring to Tucker's earnest face. "Tucker Reed, are you proposing to me in a stagecoach?" A flush crept up his neck. "I suppose I am. Not very romantic, is it?" "I had planned to wait, to do this properly at your father's ranch with the mountains as backdrop, but now that you're here, I find I can't hold the words back any longer." Felicity laughed, a sound of pure joy. "It's perfectly romantic because it's perfectly you, straightforward and honest and true." She held out her left hand. "And yes, I will marry you, though perhaps we might wait a few months to be certain we suit each other in everyday life as well as we do in emergencies." Tucker slipped the ring onto her finger, his own hands trembling slightly. "I'm certain already," he said, "but I can be patient if that's what you need." As it happened, patience wasn't required for long. Felicity moved into her father's ranch, with Mrs. Peterson coming daily to serve as chaperone and housekeeper. Tucker rode over almost every day, and together they explored both their growing feelings and their plans for the future. They decided to merge the two properties, using the double R as their main residence, but keeping Judge Hawthorne's ranch as a special retreat. Oliver was delighted with the arrangement, declaring that the family ranch had been too quiet for too long. By Christmas, any lingering doubts had vanished. They were married on New Year's Day, 1886, in the small church in Willow Creek, with Oliver Reed beaming proudly and Mrs. Fitzgerald dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Mr. Abernathy gave the bride away in honor of her father, and even Felicity's mother sent a warm letter of congratulation along with a generous wedding gift. Their life together unfolded with all the challenges and joys that Tucker had predicted. Montana winters proved as harsh as they were beautiful, but Felicity found unexpected pleasure in the cozy evenings by the fire, reading aloud from her favorite books while Tucker carved wooden figures for the children they hoped would come. Spring brought new calves, summer brought the hard work of haying, and autumn painted the aspens gold once more. Through it all, their love deepened and strengthened, tested by occasional disagreements but never seriously threatened. When their first child, a daughter they named Olivia Eleanor, was born a year after their wedding, Tucker held the infant with awe and wonder. "She has your eyes," he told Felicity, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "And your dimple," Felicity replied, touching the tiny indentation in their daughter's cheek. "Poor child," Tucker laughed, sitting carefully beside his wife and daughter. "Never have I been so grateful for a runaway wagon," he said softly. "Who could have imagined where it would lead us?" Felicity leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. "I think perhaps my father knew," she said. "In his journal, he wrote that he hoped I would find a place that spoke to my soul. He couldn't have known it would be here with you, but somehow I think he would be pleased." "I think so too," Tucker agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And I think he would be proud of the life you've built here." As the years passed, that life grew richer and fuller. Two more children joined their family, Thomas Oliver and Frederick James Healthy, robust boys who took to ranch life with natural enthusiasm. The Double R prospered under Tucker's management, becoming one of the most respected ranches in the territory. Felicity found her own place in the community, establishing a small lending library in Willow Creek and occasionally teaching literature to eager young minds. She also wrote articles for newspapers back east, describing life in the Montana Territory with clarity and passion that earned her a modest reputation as a regional writer. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tucker surprised Felicity with a special gift, a bound collection of all her published writings, alongside the letters they had exchanged during their separation. "For our grandchildren," he explained as she leafed through the volume with misty eyes. "So they'll know how it all began, with a runaway wagon and a cowboy who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "The very right place," Felicity agreed, looking up at the man who had become the center of her world. At 40, Tucker was still as handsome as the day they'd met, though with a few strands of silver at his temples and laugh lines around his eyes. "I think I've been falling into your arms ever since." That night, as they sat on the porch of the main house watching the sun set behind the mountains, Felicity felt a deep contentment that still surprised her sometimes with its completeness. The Boston literature professor she had once been seemed like a character in someone else's story, not unhappy, but incomplete in ways she hadn't recognized until Montana and Tucker showed her what she had been missing. "Any regrets?" Tucker asked, seeming to sense the direction of her thoughts. Felicity shook her head, leaning against his shoulder. "Not one. Every choice, every turn in the road has led me exactly where I was meant to be." In the distance, their children's laughter echoed as they played a game of tag with their grandfather, who at 75 still had enough energy to keep up with his grandchildren. The ranch hands were finishing the day's work, and the smell of dinner cooking wafted from the kitchen where Mrs. Fitzgerald's niece, who had taken over when her aunt retired, was preparing the evening meal. "You know," Tucker said reflectively, "when I was a young man, I used to ride out alone and wonder what my life would amount to, whether I'd build something worth leaving behind. And have you?" Felicity asked, though she knew the answer. Tucker's arm tightened around her shoulders. More than I ever dreamed possible. Not just the ranch, though I'm proud of what we've done with it, but this you, our children, the life we've made together. That's what matters. As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared above the mountains, Felicity silently thanked the twist of fate that had thrown her from that wagon and into the arms of the man beside her. Life had not always been easy, but it had always been rich with purpose, and love the greatest adventure she could have imagined. And it had all begun with a moment of terror transformed by strong arms and a steady heart into the first chapter of their shared story, a story still being written with each passing day, each small triumph and challenge, each moment of the life they had built together in the shadow of the Montana mountains.